Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful summer evening. My name is Dr. Cameron Matthews, and I am one of the co-directors and co-founders of the Tour for Diversity in Medicine. We are very excited to be co-hosting not only tonight's event, but next week and the week after and ongoing with both the Student National Medical Association and the Latino Medical Student Association in an effort to support our soon-to-be graduates, our fourth-year medical students. This program called Road to Residency started actually last year in 2020, and we are very eager to continue these sort of events in supporting of our students. We'll give you a little bit of background about what the tour is, but let me first bring on my colleagues on the tour and in life to introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. So Dr. Landry, Dr. Romero Arenas, please join us.
Dr. Romero, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Minerva Romero Arenas. I'm a general and endocrine surgeon at Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City. I work at New York Presbyterian Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. I do general and endocrine surgery, and I'm very happy to be here as part of one of the tour mentors.
And I'm Alden Landry. I'm an emergency medicine physician, originally from Texas, based out of Boston. Currently, I practice emergency medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and also serve as the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Partnership.
Great. And just as far as introductions, again, my name is Dr. Cameron Matthews. I am a family physician from Philadelphia, currently the Chief Medical Officer with the Veterans Health Administration based out of DC. And we are very eager to be here as a group, but you'll meet others of us next week as well. But tonight we're eager to kick off the Road to Residency series by talking a little bit about the ERAS application, as well as a pretty critical piece that we've, of course, needed to focus on in the past couple of years, which is interviewing in this virtual setting. So if we could start sharing the slides, we'll just quickly give a little bit of background in order to get going. Again, we did introduce ourselves. We're very eager to be here. Who we are is the Tour for Diversity in Medicine. Some of you might have learned about us as we've traveled the country, but we've been to about 27 states around the country at this point, really hoping to connect with mainly pre-medical students, both high school and college students, on a really personal level. We love mentoring, we love motivating our students. But honestly, this Road to Residency program is just an extension of that we need to continue to support you as medical students on your path into your respective careers. And of course, the three of us in very different fields are here, along with a good number of other of our colleagues, T4D mentors, we call ourselves, in order to help you along that path. So we're going to jump into a lot of information this evening. Hopefully it will be helpful, but we'll also try to share a lot of our own personal stories as well so that you get some insight onto how to really optimize your application and get the most out of this application season. Dr. Landry.
So we're going to go over some high-level stuff because I think from a student standpoint, you should have received a lot of this information from your medical schools. I think the purpose of this conversation is to really try and break down some of the nuances that may be happening as you go through this process, and also for us to share our personal stories. One of the things that we do best on the Tour for Diversity in Medicine is we not only share the information that we get from the governing bodies, the organizations that are helping to establish the criteria for, in some cases, the application to medical school. In other cases, it's the process to move forward in residency. But we also try and share our personal stories as we go through this. And so as we're having this conversation, we're going to be having this in the backdrop of us sharing our stories. Now, admittedly, we're a little bit older than you all, so our experiences are going to be a little bit different. However, I think there's some important conversations that we can have that will carry over that you can relate to. And so as you think about your fourth year of medical school, we often describe it as the golden year of medical school, but unfortunately, it really comes with a lot of angst and anxiety because students are trying to process what's going to happen very quickly as they transition from from undergraduate medical education, where you have been in medical school, to residency. And you have this time where you have a lot of things that are expected of you, but you don't necessarily have a clear rhyme or reason. It's not really planned out for you the same way that other steps in your life has been planned out and scheduled for you. So there's a couple things that you should be thinking about. So the first bullet that we have here is taking step two. Now, as you see, there's no step 2 CS. Congratulations. You guys dodged a bullet there. And I think the USMLE finally got it right, because step 2 CS really didn't offer much nutritional value for residency directors as they were looking at evaluating you. But step 2 CK still offers some value. And it's really important for you to think about when you're going to take step 2. Now, the reality is, at this point, if you haven't taken step 2, the likelihood of you having the opportunity to schedule it and then get that score in time for your application to be ready on that date of September 29th, October 1st, when programs are really looking at applications, it's a little bit tough, right? Because it takes still 4 to 6 weeks for those scores to come back. That being said, if you didn't have the strongest step 1 experience and you really were hoping that step 2 was going to bolster your application, if you take it and you take the exam and you get that score back before you have started to receive interview offers, it's actually a good opportunity for you to reach out and give updates to the institutions that you applied to, so they can have that as a part of their portfolio when they're reviewing your application. That being said, look at what your school's recommendations are. Oftentimes, you have to take step 2 probably no later than either October 31st or November 30th, depending on your institution, mostly because they want to make sure that you have a passing score before graduating medical school. And if you have a score back, and let's say for some reason you do trip up and you fail it, you still have plenty of time to retake step 2 in time for graduation. So look at what your school is expecting you as far as when you need to have that step score completed, but also think about how it may bolster your application if you were in that sort of gray zone and you weren't necessarily the strongest when it comes to your step 1 score. We are looking at students who are doing visiting electives. It's a great opportunity. It's really on-the-job interviews that you're doing, but it's a two-way street. You're interviewing us and we're interviewing you. So it's a great way to see programs from the inside out. Ideally, the latest you should be doing visiting electives is probably October, because by the time you get to November, you're going to be right into that interview season. And it can be a little awkward if you're doing an away rotation and then you start getting interviews, and it's time for you to move forward and do your interviews, and you have to take off a day or two while you're at a visiting elective. So my recommendation tends to be finish your visiting clerkships, or have those done by October 30th. That being said, if you didn't do a visiting clerkship, it's okay. We understand that the pandemic has really wrecked schedules and made it really difficult for students to get those opportunities. But if you were able to get one of those, make sure you make the most out of that opportunity. Now, most of the time when I'm advising my medical students, when we talk about interviews, I typically say interviews are going to happen November, December for most specialties, and in some cases all the way through January. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing clinically, you have blocked off time so that you're either on a lighter rotation or you took one of those months off so you can do interviews. I think December is probably the most common month. Some programs are interviewing as early as November, and some are interviewing as late as January. But think about the specialty. Look at the programs that you're applying. Oftentimes, this information is available on their website, and you can see all this information. Lastly, think about this. Interviews are more than likely going to be virtual. I know the majority of programs have already committed to it. A lot of specialties are making just across the board recommendations. In particular, OBGYN was the first to say interviews are going to be virtual. So have the expectation that you're not going to be traveling, but you will be sitting in front of a computer like this. And it's going to be important. And you'll hear from Dr. Matthews later on about the importance of being well prepared for those virtual interviews. You should be in a position where you're wrapping up your research, at least to the point where you're able to have that as a part of your application. That being said, the research may continue on. And if you have updates, whether it's an abstract that's accepted or a publication that happens, and it happens after you've entered this information into ERAS, it's okay to get that information in a little bit later in the form of an email update to a program if you're really interested in that program. But just keep in mind, some programs may not look at that information once they download your application and start reviewing it. So just think about trying to make sure you have as much information ready to go. Your research is wrapped up and tight as ready to go by the time you submit your application and those programs start reviewing. Letters of recommendation are extremely important. Hopefully you've asked individuals for those letters of recommendation already. If not, this is the time to ask. Every time I talk to a student and I'm encouraging them to engage with someone about a letter of recommendation, I tell them there's a couple things they have to ask. One is, can this individual write a strong letter of recommendation for me? Now, that strong letter of recommendation doesn't necessarily need to come from the person who is the most senior in the room, whether that's the department chair or the program director, but it can come from somebody who has had, you know, a presence either in your life because they've been they know you well, and so therefore because of their depth of the relationship that they have with you, they can write a strong letter of recommendation, or because of their national presence in the particular field that you're going into, they can also write that strong letter of recommendation. In addition to that, you need to make sure that you supply that person with some information about yourself, what you're applying to. The last thing you want to do is go to an internal medicine doc when you're applying into anesthesia and ask them to write you a letter, and they put that you would be a great internist without really understanding that you're actually applying for anesthesia. So make sure that that individual who's writing that letter of recommendation for you knows the specialty that you're applying to. With that, make sure that they have a copy of your personal statement in whatever state it is. Hopefully it's near finish at this point. And then also a copy of either your resume, your CV, or your ERAS application. That way there may be something else that they think is important that they can pull out and embed in that letter to really strengthen the letter of recommendation that they're going to be writing for you. Now, it's really important for you to be meeting with your mentors, meeting with those leaders in the academic community around you during this time, so they can help guide you and help you think about which programs you should be applying to and which residencies might actually fit your learning style best. So really engage your mentors. Think about how you want to engage, how they can help you in this critical transition time in your life. For us, it's really great because we get to see you grow, but also it's great because we want to make sure that you're in the best position to succeed. Next slide, Kim. So you all have probably received about 1,000 emails from your dean of students and about your ERAS application. I fully encourage you to be working on ERAS now. This is not something you want to wait until the last minute to do. You want to make sure that you are completing your ERAS application. So we're not going to go through those details specifically, but the ERAS is open. You should be entering into those details, thinking about those word counts, making sure you're putting in those key important identifiers about things that you're interested in, those key determinants, those key projects that you've worked on. Make sure that that is going into the application now, but make sure someone is a pair of eyes for you reading over this to making sure that you're expressing yourself grammatically correct, your spelling is checked, so that this application flows and it looks seamless. Again, these letter of recommendations, for me, it's really important that you get this information to me as a letter writer early so that I can be offering, getting my letter of recommendation in on time. The last thing you want to do is have a piece of information about yourself that's lingering out. So make sure that those letter writers have enough time to really get those letters of recommendation in. So make sure they have their tokens, make sure that they know how to access the portal, and make sure that they're going to be able to really support you as you go forward. Next slide, Kim. So we're talking about ERAS, but then there's this other thing called NRMP. And I just want you to know that these are two components of the system that are required in order for you to move forward, right? So ERAS is the application service, but when you start to match for residency, you need to be enrolled in the NRMP, the National Residency Match Program. So these are two different bodies, two different websites that you have to be registered with. So ERAS is one thing where you select the programs, you submit your application to residency, where they see your personal statement and they see your residency. But the actual rank process is done through the NRMP. NRMP we'll go over the dates later on, and we'll go over a little bit more in detail about the match, partly in this discussion later on, but also later on when we do additional webinars for you to help think about, well, where do I want to match? What is important to me? What are the things that I value? Having experienced all these interviews, where do I see myself being most successful? And thinking about how you can put those programs that you're most interested in at the top and least interested in at the bottom. The one caveat I'll say to this is make sure that every residency program that you end up putting down on your rank list is a place where you would be comfortable going for your residency education. Don't rank a place if you do not see yourself being happy in that learning environment, happy in that city, or even happy in that specialty. Because worst comes to worst, you end up in a lower spot on your rank list, and it's in a residency program that you're not happy with, or it's in a place where you're not going to thrive, and you have a 1-year contract that you are required to fulfill as part of the match. The second thing I'll say relates to the match process is the match is set up for students to succeed. So for students, when you are looking at where you want to go, you need to disregard the feedback that you're getting from residency programs. Oh, we think highly of you. We would love to see you. All these things that may be cues or indicators that residency programs may be putting out towards you, and not play the game of, well, they liked me, so I'll probably match there, so I want to rank them higher. You want to make sure that you rank the places that you think you will be most successful. Now, there's other things that we need to talk about at some point that require a little bit more unpacking. And that includes things like if you're going to be couples matching, or if you're doing a residency program where you have to do a preliminary year before going on and doing the rest of your residency program, such as radiology or dermatology or things along those lines. And we could tackle that at a later date, but that's going to also be a part of this entire process. So something else to think about. Next slide, Cam. All right, this is just purely an opportunity for you to see these dates, and it's color coordinated. And I'm 99% sure, based on how organized this slide is, that Dr. Matthews did this, because that is her detail. But this is just a quick overview for you to see how this application plays out. Key things to pull out and remember: September 1st is the day that you can submit your application. You can start submitting your application to residency programs. There's a new wrinkle in there that we're going to talk to a little bit later on about supplemental applications, and we'll try and go over some really high-level details about that. But supplemental applications will also be coming out around that time. The 29th of September is also a really important date, because that is the day that programs can start to review your applications. So they can look at you, they can start downloading all that information that you put up. So you need to have your application ready and going. But the latest you want to have your application ready to go and your ERAS application submitted is by that 29th, because that's when programs can start reviewing your application. After that, the programs are going to start to offer you interviews, and there's going to be this back and forth of opportunities for interviews and you accepting some and declining others, but that's going to play out over the course of a matter of months. And then you're going to start ranking those programs on February 1st of 2022 of where these places that you want to go. And you have opportunity to play with this rank list as you think about it, as you pray over it, as you talk with your mentors, as you do more research in the programs that you've interviewed at, and then also as you think about your gut feeling and you remember where I'm going to be most successful. And then you get to submit your application, finalize those rank lists, and then this amazing process called match happens. You all are going to hopefully have a phenomenal day on that Monday when you get that email that says you've matched. And then on that Friday, when you open up that letter and you get to find out which programs you go to. Next slide. So just to offer up a new wrinkle that you all should be aware of. So there is a new component to the application, and it is a supplemental application. And it's for the fields of internal medicine, dermatology, and categorical surgery residency programs. Now, this is a very new part of the application. They did it last year for ENT, and there were some mixed reviews, but overall it was considered a success. And so they're moving forward and expanding it into a pilot program into these 3 specialties. Now, one thing that you should know is not all residency programs in internal medicine, dermatology, and surgery are actually committed to being a part of the supplemental application pilot. That being said, if you are applying to any residency that is using it, you as a trainee, in order to interview and therefore potentially match at that residency program, you have to fill out the supplemental application. So theoretically, you can apply to residency programs that aren't participating in the supplemental application, and therefore you don't have to complete it. However, if one of the programs you're doing is going to be participating in supplemental application, then you have to complete it. So there's going to be a couple things that you really need to pay attention to. One is this important opportunity for you to signal geographically where you're interested in going. And so you're going to have a couple of opportunities to do so. And so the way that this is going to work out is they're going to break the country down into 8 regions. And you can pick up to 3 regions that you are most interested in matching in. And that can be where your home institution is, or because you've always wanted to live in a particular part of the country, or you want to get the heck away from a particular part of the country. And so you can pick 3 of those regions. Now, the other option is you can say, I don't have a geographical preference, or I choose not to disclose a geographical preference. This may come up as an issue because some residency programs may want to know that you're committed to being in a particular region. And so they may be looking for that signaling of you have a geographic preference, as opposed to you are, just doing a scattershot of the applications that you're applying to. In addition to the geographical signaling that you can do program-specific signaling, where you can send up to 5 programs saying a little extra message saying, hey, you're one of my top 5. And now the reality is, what are residency programs going to do with this? It's still to be determined. That being said, if there's a program that you are really interested in and they are participating in this process, you can flag them and say, hey, you're one of the programs that I'm most interested in going to. Now, there's another component that you're going to be able to complete, which are short answer or essay questions. And these are going to be 5 meaningful experiences. And these can include clinical experiences, whether it was a patient experience that really opened your eyes to a particular, whether it's a surgical case that really changed the way you viewed surgery, or a patient that you took care of on the wards or in the clinic for internal medicine that really made you think, this is the specialty for me. But you really only have about 300 characters 300 words to squeeze that in. So it's a really narrow window of how much information you can put in there. The other thing that's going to be important that you can put in this space is, have you experienced any hardships or any difficulties along the way that may set you apart from other applicants? And so it's interesting as I hear the feedback that I'm hearing from other advisors, because this is where, if you identify as an underrepresented in medicine individual, you're from an LGBTQ background, you're from a rural background, you are from a single family home, you went to a school, high school, that had low graduation rates, whatever it may be, this is the space that you can put that information in there. And residency programs, again, not sure how they're going to use this information, but if they're looking for a particular type of applicant, this is a space where you may be able to further identify yourself and separate yourself from other applicants. Again, applications for this will be starting around September 1st, and they're going to be released in batches to the residency programs based off of when you complete them. And this is a part of the application. There's no getting around it unless you choose not to apply to those residency programs that are participating in it. Next slide. And be sure to check out the AAMC. They have some videos, some webinar, a webinar that's up there, and there's lots more details that are going to be a part of this. But I would say, most importantly, go back and talk to your advisors as you are going through the supplemental application and making sure that you fill this out so you're able to be successful when you're going through this process. Next slide. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Romero.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, and I really am glad that you were able to tackle that supplemental application, which is definitely a new component in the match process. So we want to just highlight some sources of data. I know everybody's always interested in knowing, how did the match happen? How did my peers do last year? What are my odds? We all like to play the numbers games. So know that there are a lot of resources out there. The NRMP and the AAMC do put out annual reports talking about how students do in the match each year, and they break it down by categories. So there's a great report called Charting Outcomes in the Match. This was actually, the screenshot we have up here is from the 2020 residency match. Next slide. There's also a updated version which highlights the results of the 2021 main residency match. There are also data tables for all of the different specialty matches. As you know, there's an early match called the San Francisco match, and so you guys want to be savvy about all of the information, especially knowing that last year's match was particularly unique given the COVID pandemic and the transition to the virtual programming. Next slide. So this shows you the change in the number of active applicants and percent of applicants that match to first-year positions. This is looking at the last 5 years of data. And the different colors in the bar graphs represent US trained seniors from US and DO schools. It also includes IMGs, whether they're US based IMGs or from other countries. And as you can see, the great thing is that the trends in the match process haven't really changed. It's relatively proportionate to the number of applicants, but you do want to know that this kind of data is available. Next slide. This also shows you the number of first-year graduate medical education according to either allopathic or osteopathic medicine. And again, you can see just the tremendous number of growth. This goes all the way back to 2002. And the great thing is that you have information about who's matching, who's not matching, whether AOA makes a difference. Spoiler alert, it doesn't generally tend to make a tremendous difference. Next slide, please. And there's data tables showing you all kinds of information about what kind of intern positions are available, how many positions are available at each program, how many programs went unfilled, the number of applicants based on whether they're medical or allopathic or osteopathic doctors. This particular chart shows allopathic, but there are charts for basically every type of applicant, and it shows you the percentage of spots that were filled and the number of seniors or graduating students that were ranked. And as you can see, it shows it for all of the different specialties available in the match. Next slide. This figure shows you the number of positions offered relative to the number that were filled. And this again shows you the number of positions that were filled based on MD and DO students that were in the match process. You can see that basically there's, as you get more competitive, there's less spots available in the residency match. But in general, there are not a lot of positions that go unfilled. Next slide, please. So in terms of letters of recommendation, we just want to give you some special tips that are really considered unwritten rules in medicine. You really want to give your letter writers advance notice. Know that you're not the only student that they're probably writing letters for. And it's really important for them to be able to provide a high quality letter to be given enough time. So we really encourage you to ask early. That way, it's important for the faculty, especially if you're asking for a clinical letter during a rotation, you ask the faculty early. That way they can be more active in their observation of the care that you're providing to their patients, and that they know that you're going into that field. I know that when I get requests from students and they're looking to match into surgery, I will frequently try to challenge them a little bit more and try to push them more in terms of thinking along the lines of the problems that they're going to encounter as an intern. And it really is something that I can use to personalize that letter in terms of the details that I can provide about the care that they're providing and their thought process. So again, you want to give the letter writers advance notice. You want to include in your request a copy of your curriculum vitae and your personal statement. And it's okay if you don't have the final draft of your personal statement. You just want to provide some element of your story outside of what your interactions have been, whether that's in a clinical setting or research setting. Your personal statement is going to be sort of the foot that you put out to all the programs, and you want to have your letter writers be able to support that by incorporating some elements that essentially pull your story together. You don't want to really wait until they ask you to provide these elements. You want to just provide them right at the beginning. You also want to be real thoughtful and provide clear instructions about how to return the letters. We just get too many requests. And so if I have to look through 3 emails in order to figure out how to submit your letter, that's going to be a problem, and I'm unlikely to meet the deadline. So know that some attendings are not going to be familiar with ERAS, especially now that it's an electronic system. But do know that ERAS will be uploaded electronically. It's not a letter that gets sent back to you. And the letter writer will actually get an email directly asking them to upload it to the portal. So you just want to make it clear when you request that letter that they need to be on the lookout for that separate portal invitation to submit the letter for you. Always make sure to ask for a strong letter, and it's really key that you are clear in that communication. A strong letter will go a long way. A poor letter or a weak letter will go a lot further in the negative direction. And so you want to be real thoughtful. There's always a way that if you ask for a strong letter and that person cannot provide it, you're giving them a way out. And if they cannot provide that letter, it probably is in your best interest to look for another writer. You want to also review the program requirements for particular letter writers, whether they want all people in the same field, whether they will accept letters from people in different fields, and understand the general culture. This is where it's important to talk to your mentors about who they would recommend that you get letters from, because these really go a long way in making your application a strong package.
Minerva, why don't we answer one of the questions that I saw that showed up. I think we're looking at it on a screen, we're looking at it on our phones. Great question. Should all letters or recommendations be written by physicians?
I would say that in general, yes. For the application process to residency, remember that your main goal is to secure a residency position where your training is going to be clinical and you're going to be providing clinical care. There is some merit to getting a letter if you're someone who's particularly interested in research and you have that drive to look for an academic program where perhaps research is a strong component of their program. But I would say in general, the letters should all be clinical, and most of those are going to really be delineated also in the program requirements.
And just to add to that, because I 100% agree with what Minerva just said, the only difference is some specialties don't necessarily expect all the letters of recommendation to be from that specialty. So if you're applying to emergency medicine, we do have the standard letter of evaluation, or SLOE. And we do expect to see a SLOE as part of your application. But you don't necessarily have to have your other letters to be from EM physicians. And so you can have a letter from an internist or a surgeon or from a critical care doc that you worked with. So those are all reasonable. However, in some specialties, and I'll defer to Minerva on this one, surgery has an expectation that there's a chair's letter, and then you have a lot of letters from surgeons as a part of your application. So it's not just about having letters from physicians as a part of your application, but also making sure that the right letters are coming from the right specialties to what you're applying to.
I know for family medicine, it is a big deal that you are getting letters from family docs. In general, we want people that understand really the fundamentals of family medicine to actually speak to whether or not you're actually fitting within that field. And I think the same probably applies to other specialties, but it's a big deal. We even look at really what family medicine program the letter is coming from, whether it's academic, whether it's community. It should be applicable to what program you're actually applying to. Not always the case, but we do pay attention to that. You'd be kind of shocked about the details that we pay attention to, because sometimes the letter itself can be a little bit rote, right? It's this student manages their time well. Like, yeah, you should at this point in your career, but otherwise we're looking for more details that signal whether you're going to fit in our programs, whether you're going to really meet the needs of the specialty, and whether the specialty is actually going to, I would say, benefit from you being in it. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but we are kind of screening you, and even in our regular day jobs, you're going to need letters of reference and that sort of referral, that sort of recognition all throughout your career. So having those conversations with your faculty early, making sure it's a strong recommendation, but also maybe even helping them with some of the language, because some of your faculty are not good writers. I mean, some of them are just downright pitiful. And sometimes you do need to author some draft language. There's nothing wrong with that. Coordinating what one letter is going to say versus another, so it's actually hitting all the right points. You're not having repetitive information shared. It helps for you to actually take that initiative and provide that support.
And, you know, there was a piece of advice that I heard from a program director that I thought was really interesting that probably best shared here is, you know, students often struggle about, you know, sharing a shortcoming or a struggle. Let's say that you had to repeat step one, or that you failed a clerkship, or that you took an entire year off for whatever particular reason. And a lot of students are really uncomfortable in putting that information forward in their personal statement. But a savvy letter writer and a well-coordinated attack, as Cameron was mentioning, you can identify a letter writer who can put that information in your letter of recommendation, but then also explain, you know, a little bit more, you know, whether it was a personal tragedy or that happened, or you had a mental health issue, or whatever it may be. And that letter writer can really be the one that addresses some of the red flags that may be in your application, and can still help to highlight to the programs that despite this shortcoming, despite this setback, this person is still someone who I recommend for my specialty. And so if you have one of those shortcomings, if you had a setback at some point during your medical education, think about who can be that letter writer, who can build that into their letter and really help propel your application to address whatever issues you may have.
Perfect. Before we move away from the questions, or before we go to the ERAS questions, there's one more on letters. Should you still try and get a letter from an audition, away rotation that is close to the ERAS deadline, for example, September? Or would it be better to get a letter even if it will be submitted after your ERAS app?
So, you know, I think there's this is a tough question, right? Because you're asking for a letter from someone who may be incredibly busy, and it may be really tough for them to get that letter in time. So in addition to what Minerva said earlier about asking for a strong letter, asking for a timely letter as well. And so giving them a deadline. And if they can't meet that deadline, then it's okay. And you just need to move forward. Remember, you can have up to 4 letters of recommendation. You don't have to have 4. So maybe that you have 3 great letters, and that 4th letter will be the icing on the cake. But if you don't get it, you don't get it. So if you are doing a rotation in September, you know, it may be helpful to get that letter, but if they can't get it in a timely manner, then it's completely reasonable for you to forego that. The other way around that, though, is instead of you putting it in your application, you can tell that individual who may be your letter writer, hey, these are the 10 programs that I'm applying to. I know that your letter is going to come in after the deadline. Could you send a note to these programs about my performance on the rotation? And that is a way to get around it. Now, will that be entered into your file? Will all residency programs look at that? Maybe, maybe not. But it is a way for you to think about how can you get around it, especially if you know that letter of recommendation may be a little bit late and you don't want it to slow up your personals, to slow up your submission of your application.
I'm going to piggyback onto that real quickly. And getting those letters that are going to be coming in late is also a great opportunity for you to reach out to programs that perhaps haven't invited you to interview just yet. And you can always reach out to them and say, hey, there's an update to my application. If you haven't gotten around to it, maybe you can consider looking at it now. And that's a great way to have someone sort of look at your application. And maybe if you got screened out on the initial round based on other metrics, you can potentially get yourself back in the game and in the playing field so that they can look at your application with an update.
Thanks, guys. Real quick, should students opt out of reviewing their letters on the ERAS? All right, there we go.
It's a red flag if you don't. It's a red flag if you don't.
It's a red flag. All right. So real quick, a couple of questions. Actually, I think either of you can answer back on the ERAS in general. Should we submit the supplemental application by the 19th if we haven't submitted ERAS yet?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Minerva.
Yes. If you're not early, you're late.
Yeah, I agree. Try and have, you know, I think the biggest thing is making sure that you are detail oriented, because this is an additional part of your application. So make sure that you get the application in as timely as possible. They say that it's supposed to take you 60 minutes to do this. I know medical students, and you all are going to perseverate over every single word. And so I know it's going to take you longer than 60 minutes to do this. But as Minerva said, get it done as quickly as possible. Hopefully you'll have your ERAS done as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Landry. And there was one additional question on ERAS. Should you list your clinical rotations, your third and fourth year, under work experience, or where do you list that on the ERAS?
We know your third and fourth year rotations because we see those as a part of your transcript. So that's not helpful. That is not what you should be putting as far as work experience. Work experience is true work experience. If you did something that you find of value during your medical school time, or even before then, if it's something that truly means something to you, that should be in there. But your rotations are not, and your medical transcripts will be there.
All right, great. All right, I'm just going to transition on, guys. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And students, please continue to drop them in the comments. But we're just going to move to the next phase of the conversation. An absolutely critical piece in this entire application process is your interview. And I have definitely personally been through some traumatic experiences. I don't know about you, Alden and Minerva, but some of my earlier interviews, I remember them being quite difficult, quite awkward. This is in and of itself a skill set that you should practice, that you should get used to, that you did a little bit in medical school. But now that you're matured to the next level, there's really, I would say, a higher level of expectation of interaction. And we want to make sure we point out particularly how you can make sure you come across as a strong candidate, but in this virtual setting, because you may be very comfortable talking in person, but this is very different when you're on camera. So many of us are used to kind of the Zoom world, but this is still a level of formality that you need to make sure you truly are prepared for. So part of that preparation is practice. We said this probably to some of you. I love that maybe we saw some of you on the tour. You need to practice. You need to be working on interviews with your mentor, with your family members. You need to be answering questions. You need to be turning it into a conversation, not memorizing answers. It is extremely awkward for you to be just reading off things that you have memorized. Again, it's about coming across naturally. Because you're in a screen setting, there's nothing wrong with you to put some reminders on a screen to some of those more typical questions, how you can actually maybe have a phrase or so. You don't want to, again, look like you're reading off the screen. That's kind of ridiculous as well, too. But definitely don't be afraid to use the resources around you, but of course, keep the stickies away from your camera. All right, general approach is that you should be professional from the moment that you sit down. If you need to twist to actually, I don't know, sometimes I have to take care of my dog next to me. If you need to do any of that, I need you prepared to actually better respond to the camera and respond to whomever might be looking at that screen who themselves are not on camera. So what are you looking at? How are your clothes fashioned? I know sometimes my shirt even goes up. You need to be looking as prepared as you might do in that face-to-face interview. What kind of expressions are you making? Are you making it look like you're having a natural conversation, giving that verbal feedback, that nodding of your head, the smiling and the like? Remember, the interview is meant to get across that you are human, that you can communicate, that we actually want to work with you, more importantly. So the way you come across, but also the professionalism in all of these kind of visual cues are equally as critical. And more than anything, you need to remember that this is equated to you being in person, because indeed, for a lot of programs, like Dr. Landry said, you won't have that opportunity. So they are going to be judging you from the camera. Make sure you're managing your time. Please practice how you're answering questions and how you can keep them short. A lot of not just students, a lot of adults just go on and on. I actually did an interview today, and I think the gentleman recognized that he was getting a little wordy and he got a little nervous with it, and you could see him responding. That's natural. That's understandable. But please catch yourself. Again, this comes with practice. It comes with having conversations with people, answering questions, and being brief. Answer the question, but be brief. Talk naturally, talk like you're having a conversation. There's no point in rushing. You should shorten your response, not rush through it, and make sure you get to the point. Please remember that everything on that screen will be judged. I like this absolutely plain background, although I should probably get some curtains or something. Dr. Landry has the nice curtain behind him. There's people that have backgrounds and things like that. More than anything, you need to make sure you have lighting. I have one of these ring screens here. You can probably see it in my glasses. Make sure that you position it the right way, that it's natural looking as well. You don't want to look like that alien. You want to make sure that your makeup is appropriately blended and everything, because lights throw it off sometimes. You want to make sure you're in a quiet area. Again, I'm surprised my dog isn't barking, but that is just completely, unfortunately, not appropriate. It's fine when we're in Zoom meetings now. It's fine that there's babies walking around and everything. We love that stuff on Zooms and webinars, right? It's natural and everybody is just used to that space. But in the interview, that does not fly. We need you to address some formality. We need you to remove things from your background and make sure you have neutral colors and the like, so that you get the attention, not the room. Because if you also are having maybe a little bit of difficulty with your words and you're a little bit more verbose, then maybe their eye is going to start to wander. And you don't want that happening. You want them focusing on you, and you want to come across strong. Use the desk. Please do not put your laptop or your hands holding a device. Don't put your laptop on your lap. Please make sure you even prop up your laptop on a few books so that your camera is directly aligned to you. And in fact, I think we even point that out later. See even how, look at his position. I mean, this is such a great position. It looks professional, right? The room looks white, but look at how he's kind of hunched over. Look at what that looks like as compared to when you're sitting back, when you're looking a little bit more, I don't know, structured, a little bit more stiff, yes, but it actually comes across more professional on camera. Make sure you're testing all of your equipment, that your webinar, your webcam, if indeed it's separate from your laptop, is actually working. Make sure that your name, if you're on Zoom or any of the apps, that your name is there. Please make it professional and spelled correctly. Make sure it's okay to wear the earphones and headset. That's part of kind of the world that we're in. But make sure it's not overly distracting. A lot of us have the big Bose things and everything. That could be distracting to some. I'm not saying that it's necessarily unprofessional, but again, you want the conversation to focus on you. Make sure you test your microphone in advance. Make sure you call someone and test that out. See if there is any sort of echo in the room that you're in, because indeed, again, that's distracting. You want to make sure you minimize all of those different distractions as much as possible. And then more than anything, once you get that interview link, once you get the instructions, please download the software in advance. Don't do it 10 minutes in advance, 5 minutes in advance. Put it on, test it out, see if you can even connect.
Can I just want to interrupt you briefly,
Jump
Kim, because I think what you're saying is really important, especially because not everybody uses Zoom, not everybody uses WebEx. And so you're going to be using different formats for different interviews. And so make sure not only do you have that program downloaded onto your computer, but you have the latest version. So I would encourage you to just check and see if there's any software updates, because some of those software updates can be the difference between you having a good audio and good camera and smooth transitions versus you not being able to get onto an interview and then having a resort to having to use your phone for the interview, either as a phone call or you're holding your phone for that. So I think it's really important that you make sure you have the software up to date. And, if you need to borrow a computer from your institution, I know a lot of schools are allowing students to do this, or they're setting up spaces for students to do their interviews on campus because they're worried about that background of the noise, or they lived in a multi-generational family home. And so they're not able to find a place to have a quiet background or a professional setting. So make sure you know what resources are available to you from your school. And more than likely, they're going to have that software up to date. And they can also put you in a room that's going to be best equipped for you to do well on your interview.
If I can chime in on that. Yeah, if I can chime in. If you are thoughtful about this, you want to set up that space in advance. And we're going to be setting up mock interviews. You should be setting up mock interviews with your own mentors at, at your institution locally. And so try to practice those interviews in that space. It helps you become more comfortable. It helps you get in that groove so that the day that you show up for the interview, it's not all new to you.
Minerva, that's such a good point. When you're doing your mock interviews, hopefully you as students have signed up for our mock interviews where we'll be pairing you and hopefully you'll be getting your mock interviews through in September. Please use the time to ask the person, your interviewer, how do I look on screen? Would you change anything? Get the feedback that's going to make you a little bit more positive. Ask, how is my eye contact? How am I sitting? How is my background? Ask those questions during your mock interview. The whole point of the mock interview is to practice. So get the feedback that you need. I forgot another point that I was going to make. But anyway, Alderman, you have a great question there. Camera quality, I think, is pretty important, but I don't think you need to go crazy. Like a MacBook Air, of course, it depends on what year it is. If you're talking like, the 20 years ago, that's a problem. But I don't think you need to go out and get a serious high quality one. You're not necessarily, recording anything or anything. You just want to make sure that it doesn't look too overly pixelated because that could be distracting. You want to make sure that the coloring makes sense. And sometimes poor cameras, make you look washed out and things like that. You can't adjust it or anything. So again, I would try your camera with your mock interviewer. If they let's maybe think about something else, go ahead and get another one. I think that's the best approach. All right. So just a few more pieces here. The positioning I was talking about that gentleman, right, who is a little bit here. I want your camera a little bit higher. In fact, mine right now is a little bit low. You can actually see that I'm a little bit angled down because the camera is actually kind of at my chest level. I want your camera at the eye level. I want you looking at the camera. And I know this is so hard, but practice this during your mock interviews. Look at the camera, not at the person. They are going to be looking at you. You need to, of course, connect with them and everything, but look at the camera instead. Your shoulders should be in the frame. It shouldn't, I don't even know how to do this. I was trying to angle. I think you guys know what I'm saying. You need to be in the frame. And in fact, I actually think I have some photos of what not to do. There we go. I didn't need to adjust my camera. The talking head, just this big head where you're this close versus being a little bit more natural, a little bit more professional. Your shoulders are at the center of the screen. We talk about this a lot in our interview conversations. This is still the time to understand that we are in a conservative field. Yes, when you get to a level where you're going to be able to express yourself a little bit more and just be tatted up and pierced up and everything. Trust me, there's a lot of us as attendings that can do that. But literally, this is still a level of conservatism that needs to be acknowledged. At least you still have people judging you. You still really, as you did in medical school, you still want to come across in a proper presentation. So make sure that you do have the full business attire, that your hair is at least controlled. It does not have to be pulled back and bunned and everything, but it needs to be controlled. Nothing wrong with the curls. Please, girls, rock the curls. But let's at least get it a little bit more controlled, maybe like partially up, partial down, however you want to think about it. All right. This is, of course, one of the more famous ones. Please wear your bottoms. Again, you don't know if you may need to stand up in front of the camera, how this may act. Please dress yourself. Okay, skip the shoes if you want to, but at least put on the bottoms. My goodness. All right. And get there early. I love the advice that we already gave about making sure you have the software on time and everything. But to be early is to be on time. Get in there early, reading over maybe some of your Post-it notes or a book or your phone or something. Not necessarily jamming the music, but maybe a little bit because you want to calm yourself and you want to center yourself. I think that's fine too, but think about what music you're playing. Can they hear it? Use your relaxation techniques, but make sure that you're doing it early and that you're considering every moment in front of the screen as being actually part of what's going to be judged, unfortunately. All right. So your next steps, we went over that whole calendar. Yes, Dr. Landry, that was me being pretty detail oriented and listing out dates and everything. But that's how I think. I need to see everything in line. Please plan your application calendar now. Think about what you're going to be doing throughout the year. Think about your rotations. family events. I mean, this is the time management that is necessary for the rest of your career. So plan out your application calendar. Make sure you attend your specialty panels, and I will project that up right now. What is actually planned, we have a lot more coming. Sorry for all the TBDs. We have some amazing panels planned during the week of the 23rd. We have a special one this year that we are very excited to host, which is a focus for our LGBTQ students to make sure that they are able to have a conversation in a safe space. I think we all need that, and we wanted to make sure that your questions could be answered. But of course, there will be individuals on many of our panels who are able to ask those questions as well. Again, you will get the webinar links, the registration links by your email over the next week or so. We're just confirming we've got great leads across all of these panels. We've got more panels than we were even able to offer last year. And I will throw out there, we do have videos from all of the panels last year. They are on our YouTube channel. So not only should you watch this year's, but go back and watch last year's. There may be some tidbits of information that would be helpful in your field, but please ask those questions during your panel. What is it like to apply in that field? We're all being very general now and give you kind of the higher level information, but there's a lot of particulars per field that you want to make sure you have your questions answered.
Hey, Cam, just make sure you're showing the slide so that the students can see.
Oh, yeah. Chantel, can we show the slide with the dates?
And while we're getting that up, you know, Cameron, I just want to go back and because you mentioned something earlier about the sticky notes, and I really like that idea of having the sticky notes around sort of to help you sort of frame some of your questions. But as you mentioned about where to look, put a sticky note next to your camera and say, look here. And that way your eyes are always drawn back to that camera. So you're looking at the camera, not looking down at the person or looking to the left or right. So when you have that sticky note next to your camera, you know that you had that constant reminder saying, this is where I need to be looking.
Great point. That's actually really good. Sorry about that, guys. We're sharing the slides now. A couple of questions. Zoom backgrounds, I think, are perfectly reasonable, professional. You've seen those ones with all the bookshelves, you know, the like rate your room on Zoom type things and everything. Use them. They're fine. Make sure, though, that you're wearing colors that don't necessarily blend in, usually the green screen or something, because, again, it's distracting. So just think about what you're wearing. And, again, practice. Turn it on. Look at yourself. Have somebody else look at you.
And some residency programs are actually going to provide all applicants with the same background because they're trying to minimize any potential bias that, you know, Dr. Matthews was mentioning earlier. You know, if you have, you know, either a really bland or a really dramatic background, that may be something that the interviewer gets, you know, pays more attention to than your actual interview. So some residency programs have gotten pretty savvy and just come up with a very generic general background that they encourage all the applicants to use. And so if you go apply to our program and they offer you a virtual background, and that's because they're trying to minimize the potential bias that may come from their own interviewers. And I think that's a pretty savvy move from the residency programs.
Definitely. All right, guys, we are coming to the end of our hour. I think we'd be happy to answer any quick questions that there may still be, but please definitely follow us all over social media. We're everywhere. We've got a couple of hashtags we use regularly. We are here to support. We love doing this work with medical students. For those of you who may not know, the tour was actually founded out of SNMA. Alden and I were both national officers in SNMA and came up with this idea, and we just continue to do this work today. Particularly excited, though, to have Minerva and other leaders from LMSA joining us on the tour as well, too, as we really try to do a lot of outreach, not just in medicine. We also focus on dentistry and pharmacy. So please let your other friends, family members know we've got programming for you. All right, some real quick questions. Have there been emails sent out about the specialty panels? Not yet. They're coming. Sorry about that, Diana. They're coming. We're still planning. We wanted to do just one email with all of the different links as opposed to needing to shoot out different batches of them. So that'll be coming soon. Do you see all virtual interviews becoming permanent change in the residency application process? We got a third year asking, should she be prepared for next year?
Well, you know, I would say we didn't think we were going to be doing year 2 of this, but our country hasn't behaved when it comes to the pandemic. And so here we are in year 2 of virtual interviews. Will this be a component going forward? I think there is going to be a space for virtual interviews going forward. Not everybody is going to universally adopt them, but I think you will see more hybrid options of either coming in person or participating virtually. I think that programs are really opening up to the fact that they are able to engage individuals from other parts of the country. They recognize that the cost of interviewing, that barrier is lessened because of virtual interviews. And so I think there is going to be something that will continue going forward. To what degree, I think we're still up in the air there.
Yeah, there's nothing like a in-person interaction, right? And I agree. I think there's a benefit to just the wider range of people we can reach through virtual interviews. But I still like to kind of know somebody. I mean, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities, but I don't think it's going away completely. Kind of like telehealth, kind of like other things that came around with the pandemic. Things won't go back to normal, but they will be a kind of hybrid approach. All right. Guys, for the workshops, the times, the list, and everything are being emailed out to those students in SNMA and LMSA who are #1 members and who have registered for the mock interview program. Unfortunately, if you are not a member and did not register, you will not get those links. This is a benefit that we're offering to our SNMA and LMSA members. However, obviously, this workshop, as well as our YouTube videos from the panels last year, as well as next week's workshop, are all publicly available. So please feel free to visit our YouTube channel.
I think there was a question about the virtual meet and greets, and I would generally say we encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. It's a great way to, I would say, semi-informally interact with the residents and sometimes faculty that are at these programs. It's a great way for you to get to know folks and to be able to ask questions in a little bit of a less formal setting than your interview. Also know that you're not really going to get to attend any sessions in person. And so it's really your only chance to get a sense of how are people interacting, right? You're going to be working with your co-residents 80 hours a week or so. And you really want to know, are these folks that I can spend that much time with? Because that's most of your waking hours for the next, 3 to 7+ years.
Actually, that's such a good point. Please attend those. There were definitely programs that I probably would have ranked quite high just based on kind of the facts that you find on the website or even the curriculum or even connection to faculty. Then I met the other residents and I said, oh, no way. I am not going to work well on a team with these people. They seem weird. They don't communicate. I'm a very extroverted type of person. I was like, I don't think I can work with these people. And you are going to be in a close setting with these people, exhausted. You want to make sure it's people you work with. So you work well with. So please attend those open houses, meet the residents. That's a critical piece of the two-way process of interviewing. You're interviewing these programs, but all the people in there, not just the interviewers.
I 100% agree. Cam, I'm shocked that you're an extrovert. I would have never guessed that having known you. But as far as what Minerva just said and what Cameron said, the one thing I will say about these virtual interactions with residents is that if you come off a little aggressive, it's going to potentially backfire on you. Go in, be strategic with the questions that you ask. Participate. Don't be be on the wall, not answering and participating, but don't be the one that's charging and overly intrusive with the questions and interrupting others. Make sure that you play nice in the sandbox, even in these situations.
Yeah, these are kindergarten rules, right? And we often say that the interview process, you guys are all stellar. Everyone on paper, you're high achievers. The interview process is really meant to screen out the crazies and meant to screen out people we can't work with. Who can I listen to at 3 a.m. when I'm getting a consult, and can I tolerate you being able to do so in a professional manner?
All right. With that, I'm going to give a final plug. Next Tuesday, the 17th, is our next open workshop in the Road to Residency series, where we're going to be focusing on personal statements, and your CVs. Pretty critical pieces that are, of course, are there to help share the rest of your story in the application process. We wanted to focus on those particularly just because sometimes they need a little bit of work. So we've got a whole new panel of T4D mentors who are going to be sharing some advice and actually one of their own CVs and another person's personal statement. So you can say, I know, I was like, not me. Ooh, not me. But they will be great next week. So please join us and SNMA and LMSA next week as well, too. But thank you. I want to thank Dr. Landry, Dr. Romero Arenas, Chantel in the background producing. Yay. And thanks actually to all of SNMA and LMSA. Good luck as you are entering this application season, guys. Have a great evening.
Good luck, guys. We got your back. We will support you in this process. Reach out to Tour for Diversity if you have questions. We would love to see you at our institutions. And so we look forward to sort of seeing you virtually on interview day and hopefully seeing that you match at one of our institutions next March.
Exactly. All right, guys. Have a great evening.
Take care, everyone.